So the topics under conservation biology that we have in Unit 2, we'll be looking at in situ and ex situ. So can anybody just explain to me the difference between in situ and ex situ conservation? What are the differences there?
Situ is a conservation in a natural environment, and in situ is conservation outside of that environment.
All right, lovely.
Ex
Right,
situ, sorry.
ex situ. All right. So that is generally what it is, right? So different types of conservation. So we're looking at that. So there are different names for conservation. So in and so Latin for in and out of place, in situ and ex situ. Right. So in situ is in place and ex situ is outside of the place. Right. Describes the location for a wildlife. Right. So in situ refers to animals in their original home, and ex situ describes the conservation in which animals have been removed from their original home. Right? So there are different benefits to in situ and ex situ conservation, right? So let's look at this. Environmental conservation. So generally this refers to the protection, preservation, management, and restoration of natural environments, right? And the ecological communities that inhabit them. So it's a way of us like protecting or safeguarding, right, the ecosystems themselves or species that exist within the ecosystems, right? Trying to protect the habitats, trying to protect the species themselves, right? Including sustainable uses of resources and controlling pollution to try to restore, right, these ecosystems, right, or restore the environment itself. So for in situ conservation now, we're gonna be looking at some of these approaches here. All right. So protected areas and national parks are important, right? So they're designed as regions where human activity is limited or regulated to protect natural habitats and biodiversity, right? So Tobago Cays Marine Park in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right, is an important area there. It's one of the example of a national park here. So the marine park is crucial in conserving marine diversity, including sea turtles, coral reefs, and numerous fish species. All right. So we have that there. For wildlife sanctuaries and reserves, right? Our example here would be the Holchan Marine Reserve in Belize as well. Right, so these wildlife sanctuaries reserves focus on protecting specific species in their habitats, right? So these species often provide critical breeding, these areas rather, provide critical breeding and feeding grounds for endangered or threatened species. All right. So this reserve, for example, in Belize would be a home for the nurse sharks, stingrays, and a variety of different fish that are protected by the Belizean government. All right. We have a legislation and policies that are also used as a type of in situ conservation effort, right? So effective legislation and policies are essential for enforcing conservation measures for protecting endangered species. So these legal frameworks provide foundation for conservation efforts. For example, the Environmental Protection Act in Barbados, right, would have been a good Caribbean example, right? So this legal framework for conservation and management of the island's natural resources. The act includes provisions for the establishment of protected areas, the regulation of pollutants, and the conservation of wildlife itself. All right. So we have that marine pollution control, right, within this act here. Ex situ conservation now. So this is when we take the species, right, critically endangered species, right, from their areas, right, and use ex situ methods in order to preserve them. So zoos and aquariums, what we're doing is taking all these endangered species and carrying them to these areas to conduct research and to educate the public about conservation issues, right? So they also participate in breeding programs to support the reintroduction of species into the wild. So the Curacao Sea Aquarium that we see here in this picture is an example of a zoo or aquarium that we can look here for ex situ with us, right? So we have that there. Botanical gardens and seed banks, right? I chose to use a Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden here, right? So we're looking at this here. So what we're looking at here is that this botanic garden, right, actually collaborates with different Caribbean countries to conserve tropical plants, right? So they take these tropical plants from all over the Caribbean and store them in these facilities. So botanical gardens and seed banks conserve plant diversity by collecting and preserving seeds and plant specimens. These institutions play a vital role in safeguarding plant species from extinction. Right? So we have that there. We have captive breeding programs as well. For example, for the recovery of the iguana at the Jamaican iguana at Hope Zoo in Jamaica, that would have been a good example as well. Right? So this program breeds iguanas in captivity to release them back into the wild, right? Specifically into the Hellshire Hills, right? So this initiative has significantly increased the population of this critically endangered species and raised awareness about its conservation, right? So at one point, Jamaicans were like, this iguana was once here, I know it's not. Right? So it was basically on course to complete extinction. Right? So what they tried to do is remove some of these endangered species from the environment, carry them captive, keep them in breeding programs, right? In captivation, right? In captivity rather, and then release them back into the wild to increase iguana populations. Right? We have cryopreservation now. Cryopreservation involves freezing genetic material such as seeds, sperm, eggs, and embryos for long-term storage. Right? So this technique helps to preserve genetic diversity of endangered species. Okay? So an example would be the Caribbean Amphibian Rescue and Education Project CARE, right? A collaborative project involving several Caribbean nations using cryopreservation to store genetic material, right, from endangered amphibians such as the Puerto Rican crested toad. That's an example of one of those amphibians, right, that they would have helped store. So this program aims to safeguard genetic diversity and provide a genetic reservoir for future breeding and research efforts, ensuring the long-term survival of these species. All right, so that's the last one there. So here, just looking at a brief look at conservation methods and the roles here, and that is it for Module 1 of Unit 2 Biology.